All right, man. What's up? It's your boy CD Rome back with another episode of Watching Narrative Podcast presents the league. So, guys, we are 1 week removed from the start of the season. Our last episode, we was able to cover the beginning of the season, the season opener, where we were able to see two good teams go head to head with Oregon and Texas, which, of course, Oregon was able to pull away with a victory due to one of the star players being out for Texas. But that's neither here nor there. Now we've been able to see all teams face up for week one, and so far we've had the outcome to be two undefeated teams still, with two teams who are still chasing after their first win, with Oregon being one of those teams being 1-1. So they're right there in the middle of the pack, in the middle of the hunt. So what's going to happen this next week? Well, that's what I'm most excited to see. That's what I'm most excited to talk about. But I'm not going to talk too much about the future. I'm going to talk about week one. Let's talk about week one. And this is where we're going to start. We're going to start with the two teams that are still looking for their first win. And to begin with, we're going to say what went wrong. What went wrong? Let's start with Team Syracuse. Let's start with Team Syracuse. One of the teams that I projected to be at the top of the league by the end of the season. Guess what, guys? I'm still hanging on to that. I think this team will finish top three, one, two, or three. But they got a little bit of making up to do this particular week, which I think that they'll be able to do that. They got some smart individuals on those that roster to be able to kind of change their dynamic just a little bit. So, but what went wrong? What went wrong? Well, I'm gonna start with. I'm not even gonna start with the most obvious thing. I'm gonna start with something that is a conversation I did have with Ajante as well, and something that he said, "Hey, I already know." Like, and even in a conversation with George, same thing. It's already been discussed, and that is they gotta find a way to involve more of their talent at this point. Right now, they are a two-headed monster, which I projected that. We already know what Ajante can do. Uzi, I said, in many pods that, once I was able to play a few games with him, one of the most potent offensive bigs in the league at this particular moment, averaging 17 and 10. Yes, I did round up 17 and 10. And I mean, knockdown shooter, shooting, 43% from the three, 50% from the field in general. So, I mean, just doing exactly what, he is, so, was drafted to do. And that is, get a bucket, get some stops, because he is averaging 2 blocks as well. So I mean, he's doing what he needs to do, and Ajante on the other side of it is doing what he needs to do as well. I mean, getting everybody involved. Yes, 12 assists, only 2 turnovers a game. So I mean, and shooting 67% from the field, 44% from three. So I mean, really doing a great job, and he's averaging 25 and 12 now, where this team is a very high powered offensive team, which we knew that going in, right? But two areas of focus for this team going forward. One of those being finding out a way to get George more involved in their offense. In order for this team to win, they're going to need more than just two guys. And let me be very clear here. Um, George and Johnny, they're both averaging 9 points respectively. Keyshawn is the going to be the glue guy, even going forward with this roster, to fill in any gaps of of anything else that's going on with the roster. But for sure, George is a guy that's capable of averaging easily 15 points a game. And that's kind of where you're going to want to see him. And then not only that, no assist at all. So that's the other piece of it, is just allowing him, a guy who's played point guard before, allowing him to be able to actually facilitate the offense a little bit, which will give Ajante a little bit more of a a couple plays off, where there's no pressure for having to make every single play. And also, if you look at the way that these other teams are constructed, everyone has that two-headed monster from a guard perspective, where Robbie has Will, and then, hey, guess what? He got Cognac as well, where Petty has Greg, who can facilitate, and guess what? JP is one of those leading scorers on that team as well. So, excuse me. And then even with James now, hey, guess what? You got Terrence. So most of every team, and of course Yodi with Martin. So in order for them to be effective, George is going to have the ball in his hand, not only to just score, but even to facilitate a little bit more, because he does have the ability to do so. Where now you could easily have Ajante coming off of pin downs, like instead of always having all of the attention on him, now you can have him moving off the ball, maybe in a Steph Curry fashion, and could be more even of a deadly potent, just a catch and shoot person, just 20% of the offense, So, and that also allows them to have different sets, different looks. And I know that's something that they're going to work on. Now, something that is going to be an alarming thing as well for them going forward of what went wrong is the rebounding. It's the rebounding. As a team, they're averaging 14 rebounds a game. Guess how many rebounds Austin is averaging? 14 and a half. So with your whole team averaging 14 rebounds a game, and the best team, or one of the top two teams at this particular moment is averaging more than your entire team, that's going to be an issue going forward. That's going to be an issue. Yes, this team can score. This is, Phoenix Suns, 2007, 2006, where, I mean, they can obviously put put the ball in the basket easily, shooting great percentages from the field as a team, shooting 60%, and shooting 42% from the three. So, I mean, shooting great as a team offensively, but where, to me, they're going to have to make improvements is on the defensive end. The rebounding is part of defense. And then the other piece of that, I said that Uzi was averaging 2 blocks a game. The entire team is averaging 2.5. The entire team is averaging 2.5 steals, where a team like Kansas is averaging like 8 or 9 steals a game. So that's the other piece of it. Getting in the lanes. Yes, they've been patched, but finding a way to still get in the lanes, cause some havoc, because a team they're going to have to play fast. That's just going to have to be their playing style. The rebounding piece of it, Keyshawn's going to probably have to drop down a little bit more to help with the boards, to kind of, help alleviate that a little bit more. But in order for this team to go to where I projected them to go, they're going to have to make some adjustments to get George more involved, and then also to get rebounding and get maybe a little bit more deflections or a little bit more steals in the games. Now, just from looking at the games, I mean, these games were, even the game with Kansas, I mean, we're talking about one mid-range shot away from changing now to 1-1 compared to being undefeated, or I'm sorry, not having a win. So this team is not too far off. But I do think if we're looking at not just 1 week of basketball, we're looking at the entire season. In order for this team to get to where I feel that they can get to, they're going to have to find a way to get more rebounds, to get more in the defensive lanes, get more steals, and to just speed the game up. Because once they speed the game up, it's going to be hard for a lot of teams to keep up with them from a scoring standpoint. Because I really think they could actually average more points than what they're even averaging now once they get more of the entire team involved. Now, let's go to the other team that's still chasing after a win as well. Let's go to Texas. Texas is once again one of the teams that, from a projection standpoint, I did say they would be, middle of the pack, and at this moment, still chasing their first win. So let's kind of talk about what went wrong. Well, first and foremost, obviously, what went wrong is Terrence Internet Spectrum. Tell you now, buddy. And Chris tell you too. Had to let it go, man. You had to let it. Had Spectrum for a while. Hey, AT&T fiber optic. If you can get it, get your hands on it. Get your hands on it, buddy. But I will say this. Outside of that, on a more serious note, missing Terrence that game one, in the opener, I mean, that could have really changed the perspective even for Oregon. Oregon could be the team now that is still chasing a win, and Texas being 1-1. Just very, very simple. I did have a chance to call that game, and also got a chance to watch their game, their second game against Kansas as well. So what went wrong? Number one, as I mentioned, of course, yeah, we're gonna, say Terrence for that one game, but even game two, before I even get to the stats, like just me looking at their team, there's obviously an identity crisis at this moment. This team is going to have to figure out their identity. When I'm looking at their offense, and their pick and roll is not as smooth at this particular moment. And we're 2 games into the season, but hey, man, listen, if we're chasing a title, these type of things matter. These type of things matter. You can't go and say, "Oh, we'll fix it and we'll get back." No, fix it now. Fix it now. And the PNR it needs to be a little bit more smooth when that happens. What are the other 3 guys that are not involved in the PNR? What are they doing? Now, I did see some possessions where there were some off-ball strings that were coming on as well. So those are the type of things that you want to see from an offensive standpoint. This team also has one of the better bigs in the league. Now, of course, he's averaging 17 and 13. So, I mean, can't really ask for much more outside of maybe getting a few more blocks, maybe, but also shooting 71% from the field and shooting 80% from the 3. And maybe you can even say just give him more touches. I don't know. Of course, he would say, yeah, he would agree with that, right? So, but I mean, with this particular team, I also I don't, and I said this before, I've already, I'm not going to keep on harping on it. I projected the best lineup, and, the lineup that they have right now is, James at the point, Terrence was at the 2, Twiz at the 3, and Cody at the power forward position with Chris at the 5 right now. I don't know. I don't know. That's all I'll say is I don't know. Cody is one of the better 3-and-D locks in the league, and we got him at the power forward. I don't know. But that's just my 2 cents on it. I think that a lot of people that would hear this probably would agree with that as well. It's like Cody is one of the better locks in our league, if not the best lock in the league. And when you have a guy like that, you want to put him in the best position possible to be able to be effective. Now, Terrence came out in the game that his debut game, had a stellar game, 20 points, was shooting 73% from the field, had 2 steals as well. I mean, so came out and did exactly what we expect him to do. Is probably going to be one of those leading scorers for this particular team. Him along with Chris. James is actually playing very well as well, averaging 10.5 assists with only 2 turnovers and 1.5 steals. I mean, really applying a lot of pressure defensively on these guards. Even their first game, push Robbie into a few turnovers. So defensively, I mean, he's doing his job offensively as well. I think from a shooting perspective, um, this team may be, if I'm just looking at the stats here, you know, Twizzy's shooting 40% from the field, 0% from three. James is shooting 33% from the field, but he's shooting 40% from the three, so he's shooting great from the 3-point line, but just overall 33%. You want to have that a little bit higher. So from a perspective of, just to kind of wrap it all up in a bow, I think that if this team wants to be successful defensively, um, I feel like maybe they're very solid defensively, averaging 4 steals a game, which that could be a little bit more if, as I mentioned before, if you had one of your better locks on a lock. And, so for me, just going to be honest, I know it's early, it's 2 games in, but how long do you go before you decide for a lineup change? How far before you say, okay, you know what? Let's give this another look, because now you can't get too far behind the 8 ball, guys. Like, this is a stacked league. This is a stacked league. So I mean, you gotta, and this team is very talented. I mean, we got champions all around this team. Everybody on this roster is a champion. So, and some multi-time champions, some MVPs, final MVPs. So, I mean, listen, when we got some guys on this team, so with that being said, I think lineup change, finding the identity on the offensive end, which would be shoring up the pick and roll a little bit. From Chris' perspective, I always will say this, finding a way to even provide assists from the center spot. Like, how deadly can Chris become if, when he brings all that attention that he rightfully so needs when he's in the post, if there's a backdoor lob, if there's a kick out 2 or 3 from someone setting an off-ball screen. I mean, there's plenty of things that they could do with this offense that they'll figure it out, and we'll see what happens. But Texas, I think this next week they'll get their first win, and then we'll see kind of what goes from there. Now, Oregon, middle of the pack, one of the teams that hey, I mean, the cat's out the bag now. I mean, it is what it is. One of the teams that, when I was looking as to be a captain, this would have been the exact roster that I would have drafted. And when I say the exact roster down to a T. So I feel like Brian did a great job with drafting the roster. They're 1-1, so we're not going to necessarily say, hey, what went wrong here? Because, I mean, they did get a win. Now, they did get a win with a Terrence-less team. And we seen game 2 how, and I'd already talked about what Terrence had that game, his debut game. So, yes, that team was missing a very important piece, not even just offensively, defensively. We already know what Terrence can do on the offensive end, but what about the defensive end, the stops, the IQ? So even the Will, who had a great game that first game, would he have had that game if Terrence was in the lineup? We won't know until week 3 when they match up again. So this team here, I want to say game 1 was a great game. Game 2 was a very different game. I was able to watch that game, and Robbie from the gate definitely had his foot on the pedal. As far as looking for his offense, and that was fine. But I don't feel like he shot the ball too well. Yes, we're gonna look at the final results and we're gonna say, oh, he shot 50%. That's not bad, but just from a beginning of the game perspective, when this game with North Carolina, they kind of got a lead and kept the lead. There were some opportunities missed there, and I do feel like this team, like others, has so many different offensive weapons. This team could very well be one of the higher offensive power teams in the league, although as of right now they're showing as one of the lower offensive teams in the league. Most teams right now, they're in that 60-65 range. Kansas is at 75 a game, and Oregon is averaging 54 and a half at this particular moment. So Robbie is averaging 12 and 13, so and shooting 55% from the field. From the three right now is struggling, shooting 20% from the three, but we already know how the game of 2K works. He shot 20% this week, and then next week he'll shoot 60. I mean, it's just the game, the 2K is just gonna 2K. I've watched this guy for years now, always been a potent scorer. So scoring the ball, I'm not very worried about. The biggest thing is for him, 13 assists, 1.5 turnovers. 1.5 turnovers. And guess what else? 2 steals a game. So for me, and 2.5 rebounds a game, as a point guard. So for me, this particular team, yes, they're 1-1. Man, this team could go up or this team could go very down. And it's really based off of, and not to put all the pressure on him, but as long as he continues to play this way with 12 points, 13 assists, 1.5 turnovers, 2 steals, and grabbing rebounds as well, the only thing left after that is just to increase the 3-point range, or the percentage on the 3-point range, and then everyone else just kind of has to fall suit. Will is shooting 75% from the three right now, averaging 15.5 points, shooting 58% from the field. So I mean, he's doing exactly what you want. I mean, this was a 4th-round draft pick. What a steal! What a steal, Bryant. You're welcome, by the way. But what a steal! And, of course, Kyle is going to do Kyle-like things. I do want to see maybe a little bit more of Kyle. Right now, their pick and pop is popping. He's shooting 50% from the three. And, I mean, so they're doing very well on that perspective. I think they do have an identity offensively. They have chemistry. I think for them, it's just the defensive side of the ball, being able to get stops when you need stops, not allowing guys to backdoor you, which that happened a lot in that North Carolina game, making sure that you are walling guys up. So, I mean, for me, for this team, it's going to boil down to defense. Offense, they got it, right? We just talked about the shooting percentages. You got Cognac, who's a bucket getter, you know, and Bryant, who's actually shooting 57% from the field as well. So, I mean, you got guys that are going to do what they do offensively, but the defensive side of the ball is where this team is going to have to sew some things up in order to be successful. So I'm anxious to see who's going to step up to the plate when it comes to, because unlike other teams, this team doesn't have necessarily a designated lock. So they didn't draft a team for that perspective. So if you're going to do that, then you have to, number one, rebound the ball, which from a rebounding perspective, I do expect Kyle to maybe up his average from a rebound. He's averaging 10 rebounds a game, which is not bad, but for a rebounder like himself, I just maybe expect a little bit more than that. And as a team, they are at this particular moment averaging 17.5 rebounds. So he is getting help from others, including Robbie. So they're going to be a good team as long as they rebound. and then take care of the ball, limit their turnovers, and of course, maybe get out in transition more and get some buckets. So we'll see what happens. So now, top two teams, undefeated teams. One of those teams, is UNC. One of the ones I projected to be at the top. Kansas as well. Same thing. Projected them to be towards the top of the league, along with Syracuse there. But Kansas and UNC, both teams are undefeated, and guess what? They have a prime time game scheduled this coming Friday. Guess who's going to be there? I am. Hope you will be there. We watch your narrative. Watch your narrative. Will be commentating that game live on Zoom. Information on that will be to come. That will be of no question in my mind the game of the week. Everybody is going to be waiting to see what these two teams do. Now, we're going to do two different things with this. We're going to talk about keys to win that particular game. We're also going to talk about the previous week. What went right? What went right with this team? These two teams, what are they doing that other teams are not at this moment, and what do we need? So let's start with Kansas here, man. Offense. 75 points a game. Say it again. 75 points a game, leading by a long shot. Shooting as a team, 60% from the field, 48% from three. 48% from three. And let me tell you something about that. And I'm not going to, I don't want to, harp on. I'm not going to harp on it too much, but I'm just going to, it is what it is. The stats are the stats. The point guard, Yodi, yes, is shooting 63%. You got Martin shooting 50%. Your other two, your small forward Neal and B. Ross, of course, maybe not taking as many, but they're shooting 100% from the three. And Hunter at this particular moment is shooting 11% from the three. So, and with that comes up to that 48% as a team. Imagine if Hunter was shooting just 30% from the field, where I project him to be by the end of the season. And this particular team would be probably averaging even more points. Something that I heard from, the Team Texas was that, hey, man, if Hunter was hitting more of his shots, man, that game may have not even been as close as it was. And I agree. That is something that I saw the pick and pop that Hunter had, and Yoke getting to the rim and kicking it back to Hunter. He's wide open. And we seen before the reason why Hunter went as high as he did in the draft is because he is a knockdown shooter. So I expect that to change in week 2. And if that does happen, man, look out, man, because this team is deadly. I said the Phoenix Suns earlier, but this team here is really that Phoenix Suns team. I mean, they are high potent offense if I've ever seen one. Very similar. I don't want to say, well, I don't think as high as potent as the Raptors were last year, but I mean, they're right there. And they got two of the guys that was there for that team in Yodi and Martin. So what went right? Hey, Martin is averaging 28.5 points a game with 2.5 steals, shooting 63% from the field and 50% from the three. And we're talking about a very high volume shooter here, and he's shooting 50% from the three with only one turnover a game. So, I mean, that's what went right. Also, Yodi, 18.5 points a game, 7.5 assists with 3 steals a game. So defensively, this team is averaging 9 steals a game. And they're shooting 60% as a team. So they're not slacking on the offensive end. They're not slacking on the defensive end. This team is rightfully so where they are. Now, as I mentioned before, going into week 2, we want to see Hunter, of course, knock down a little bit more of the shots that he's missing. But we're also going to talk about the good that Hunter is bringing to this team as well. Averaging 14 points a game, 8 rebounds, 6.5 assists. Say it again, 6.5 assists as a center. So moving the rock, also 1.5 blocks per game. So is impacting the game on both sides of the floor, and not just the scoring aspect. We're talking about dropping dimes as well. One of the leading assists as a center, probably the leading assist person as a center. So what Hunter is providing for this team as the quote unquote Jokic, and I mean, we still haven't even seen this team at its unlimited power yet. This team ain't even at Super Saiyan 4 yet. And I look forward to seeing what they do when they match up against UNC. So now, what are the keys to win there? Go back down. What are the keys to win if they're looking to beat UNC? Well, number one, Hunter can't have 8 rebounds. This team is averaging the same amount of rebounds as a team that Austin is averaging, 14.5 rebounds. So keys to win, you got to box out. UNC is the complete opposite of this particular team from a offensive standpoint and a defensive standpoint. So they say styles make fights, and this is going to be one different style of a clash. And Martin's gonna have to do what Martin does. Jody's gonna have to provide the pressure that he needs to provide on this, and Neil's gonna have to be a threat as well. Because if you allow this team to find a weakness in your offense and they're able to rotate and do different things, then that's not going to bode well for you. So everybody on this team is going to have to be a threat. Hunter's going to have to hit the 3, because if you're not hitting the 3 and you allow Austin to just camp in the paint, oh man, you're doomed. You're absolutely doomed. So keys to success for this team is going to be Hunter, number one, hitting his shots, and the entire team, not just Hunter, B. Ross as well, Neil as well, rebound the ball. From a steal standpoint, I mean, defensively, they're in the lanes. We're good there. We're protecting the paint as much as we can. We're good. We're shooting at a high clip. After that, now it's just rebound the ball and box out, be a threat on all 5 members of the team. And I mean, the sky is up, for this particular team. Everything is looking good. Everything is looking well. Great drafting by Yodi once again. And I mean, keep doing what you're doing. North Carolina, UNC, one of my, picks as well to be at the top. And one of my early picks to, favorites to win it all as well. So what went right? I talked a lot about Austin, but it's not just Austin. Phil. This team is averaging 26 rebounds a game. 26 rebounds a game. And guess what? Even the point guard is averaging 1 rebound a game. So you got Austin, 14.5 rebounds. Phil, 6.5 rebounds. JP and Greg both averaging 2 rebounds a game. And then 1 rebound, from Petty. It's not only that. Guess what? All of these guys, 2 assists per game. Greg with 3. JP with 2.5. Phil with 2. Austin with. So the entire team is moving the rock. The entire team, 4.5 steals per game with 3 blocks per game. And guess what? Everybody on the team except Petty got a block. And that's rightfully so. So, I mean, from a what went right standpoint, It's the entire team. This is not just a one player effort, two player effort, a two-headed monster. Petty is averaging 14. Greg is averaging 16. JP's averaging 15. Austin's averaging 14 and a half. So, I mean, from a and Phil is just filling in everything else. He's touching every stat line, shooting 83% from the field, and then also shooting 100% from the 3-point. So you want to talk about, we just talked about, everybody's got to be a threat. Everybody on this team is a threat. There is no weakness here. There is nobody you can say we're going to let him shoot. There's nobody you can say, you can double off of. This is just a great, solid team. Now, what went right? Honestly, to me, one of the better defensive teams in the league playing man right now. You have very high IQ on this team. Number one, they're limiting the backdoor cuts, which a lot of teams are really finding that effective. They're limiting the backdoor cuts. Their pick and roll defense is so great because Austin can step up on the pick and roll and not worry about, if they shoot the ball, I'm not going to get the rebound. Because why? Because you got Greg with 2 rebounds a game, JP with 2 rebounds, and Phil with 6.5. So he's not worried about the rebound because he's going to communicate that. You could hear him on the screen. Hey, Phil, grab that board. Boom. He ain't worried about it. The board is got. So when you have communication and then you have a full team effort on the rebounding perspective, so that way the center can move around. The reason, I hate to go all the way back, but just you can go back at various amounts of teams where you need a rebounding squad, so that way everybody can fly around. The center's not so glued to the paint because then he's worried about, oh man, I got to be able to clear the board because none of these other guys get rebounds. No, everybody's grabbing the board. So the other piece of it, because these are my 2 most important pieces on this team, and it's not Greg and Austin, it's Petty and it's Phil. Phil, because of the rebounding, because of the smart plays, making the right read. Then it's Petty because he's 300. He's 300. When you got a center and everybody says, oh man, I got to have a center that can shoot. All right. If Austin and his team ends up winning a championship, what are you going to say then? Because from where I'm looking at, he's averaging 14.5 and 14.5 without a shot. Shooting 52% from the field without a jumper. Not even a mid-range. But because he has a 3-hunting point guard in Petty, you have to, and I don't care if you're in zone. You can go zone all you want. I watched the team go zone in the second half, which was Oregon. And now, of course, they're a completely different team defensively, but they went zone. And when you got a 3-point hunter like Petty coming off of a screen and he's wide open, somebody has to do something. And guess what? If you budge off the hash, you got a Greg and a JP on it. You budge off the corner, you got to Phil possibly backdooring or shooting the 3. So this team is a full, well-oiled team. That's what went right. And their keys to success in this going into this Kansas game is they're going to have to pull up a lot. They're going to have to slow down Martin. Martin is going to be the difference between Kansas winning a championship and not winning a championship. Yes, that I've already said it. The entire team is shooting. They're one of the better offensive teams in the league, but UNC is that as well. They're great offensively, and even more so, I think they're slightly better defensively. This is one of those grit teams where they're not going to have the same amount of points as a Kansas team. They're not going to be able to outscore them, outgun them, but I think that they can get the necessary stops as a team. They're not going to even be in the lanes as much as a Martin team and a Yoke team. They're in the Kansas team. They're not going to be in the lanes as much as that team either, but the man-to-man defense, the walling up, the rebounding, making sure we don't allow any offensive boards. And guess what? we're going to get offensive boards. We're going to get second opportunities. That's where this team is hanging their hat as well, is the grit. This is like the a more high-powered offensive team of the Memphis Grizzlies, because Phil, who's Zach Randolph right now, and Austin, who's Marc Gasol. I mean, these guys are on the glass. They're creating second chance opportunities for a team like Petty, who's shooting 57% from the three. So if the board is grabbed and kicked out, you got a guy who's shooting almost 60% from three, and then Greg, who's shooting 43% from three. So how can you win against Kansas? Is going to have to be using their weakness against them. You're going to have to grab boards, get second, because you can't necessarily score at the clip that they're going to. If you get the stops, get your defensive rebound in possessions where you may miss a shot, get offensive rebounds on a team that's averaging the same amounts of rebounds as Austin by himself, then, man, you're going to be very hard to beat as well. But I look forward to seeing the results of these games. I look forward to seeing week 2 of these games and seeing really what adjustments, because the championship doesn't start in week 1, guys. So anybody who's putting so much, stock into week 1, very much so, UNC could lose 2 games in week 2. Kansas could lose 2 games in week 2. One of those games is being against each other. And then you could have a team like Syracuse step up and win 2 games. And then now this league looks different. My conversation is different. Your conversation is different in the chat. So 1 week does not solve for anything. We're going to have to see more basketball from all parties, all sides. But as of right now, the proof is in the pudding. The 2 teams that are at the top are UNC and Kansas, and they happen to face off against each other. Man, I just can't wait. I hope you guys got your popcorn. I hope you guys got whatever your drink of choice may be, Diet Coke or Dr. Pepper or whatever it is that you like. Man, because I'm going to be sitting courtside commentating. Can't wait for it. So listen, guys, the league is among us, and we are all excited to see what happens next. And Watch Your Narrative will be there along for the ride. And we look forward to a great season. UNC, Kansas, Friday night, live on Watch Your Narrative. Hey, man, we're out.